Thank you all for being here today. I want to talk to you about something deeply personal, something many of us have faced in different ways, the moments when we feel we just can't go on, the times when we hit a wall, when strength fails and hope seems to be slipping away. You know the feeling. You've tried everything. You've prayed, you've worked, you've waited, and still nothing changes. And in that silence, it's easy to believe that maybe it's over, maybe it's too late, maybe you just don't have what it takes. But I want to remind you of a simple truth. When He can't, God can. When you can't, God can. That moment when your strength gives out isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of something new. Because God doesn't need your perfection. He doesn't require that you have it all together. In fact, the Bible is full of stories of people who couldn't. Moses said he couldn't speak. Gideon said he was too weak. Jeremiah said he was too young. Peter denied. Paul had a thorn, and still, God used them. You see, God isn't limited by our limits. He's not stopped by our failures. When we say, I can't, God says, I already have. He steps in where we step back. He strengthens where we are weak. His power is made perfect in our weakness, not in spite of it. That's not just a comforting idea. It's a call to shift our focus. So maybe you've tried and failed. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're done. But God isn't. He hasn't stopped working. And He hasn't stopped believing in you. And when you feel like you've come to the end of yourself, that's the best place to let God begin. Don't give up. Don't write yourself off. Because when He can't, when you can't, God can. And that changes everything. Thank you. There comes a time in every person's life when they face a wall. A place where their strength runs out, their options grow thin, and their heart feels heavy with discouragement. Maybe it's the weight of disappointment, the silence of unanswered prayers, or the frustration of trying so hard and still feeling like nothing is changing. In those moments, it's easy to feel like you're at the end of your strength, the end of your hope, the end of the road. But what if I told you that this very point, this place of human limitation, is not the end at all? What if it's actually the beginning of something far greater than what you could accomplish on your own? Human limitation is not the end. It's not a period, it's a comma. It's not a closed door, it's a shift in direction. It's the moment when we move out of the way so God can step in. You see, we often try to carry everything ourselves. We try to fix it, force it, understand it, solve it. But life has a way of reminding us that we're not in control. And while that may seem like a weakness, it's actually a gift. Because when we reach the end of ourselves, we discover the beginning of God's power. God does His best work when we come to the end of our own. Think about it. When you're still trying to do everything in your own strength, you're leaning on your ability, your wisdom, your resources. But when all of that runs dry and you say, God, I can't do this anymore, you've just made room for Him to do what only He can do. It's not that God needs us to fail, but rather He wants us to trust. And sometimes we only truly trust when we run out of options. That's not a weakness, it's surrender. The Apostle Paul knew something about limitations. He prayed 3 times for a thorn in his flesh to be removed, but God's answer wasn't healing, it was grace. God said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. It's a stage on which His glory is revealed. When we admit we can't, we're not giving up, we're giving over. We're handing the burden to the one who is never meant to be a backup plan, but the source of our strength all along. Some of the greatest breakthroughs come right after the biggest breakdowns. Some of the most powerful testimonies are born from moments of deep despair. That's not coincidence. It's the way God works. He brings beauty from ashes, strength from weakness, hope from hopeless places. And maybe today you're in that place. You're tired, worn out at the end of your rope. You're saying, I just can't do this anymore. That's okay. You don't have to, because God can. You weren't created to carry it all. You weren't designed to do life without His help. So let go. Let Him in. Stop trying to be everything for everyone, and let God be everything for you. This isn't about passivity, it's about partnership. It's not about sitting back and doing nothing. It's about moving forward in faith, trusting that God will provide the strength, wisdom, and direction you need. He never said life would be easy, but He did say He would never leave you or forsake you. That promise still stands. So the next time you feel like it's over, Remember, it's not. The moment you think you can't go any further, look up. Because when you reach the end of your ability, you step into the territory of God's ability. When you come to the end of your rope, tie a knot and hang on. Human limitation is not the end. It's the threshold of divine possibility. It's where your I can't meets God's I can, and that's where miracles begin. When we think about what it takes to be used by God, our minds often jump to the idea of being perfect. We imagine we have to have it all together, live without mistakes, always say the right things, always believe without doubting, and always be strong. Over and over again, the Bible tells the stories of people who were anything but perfect. Yet God used them in powerful, history-shaping ways. If perfection were a prerequisite for purpose, none of us would be qualified. But God delights in taking broken vessels and using them to pour out His glory. He works through weakness, not in spite of it, but often because of it. Why? Because when someone who is flawed and struggling is still able to walk in faith, still able to serve, still able to trust, it points directly to God's power at work in them. It's not about what they can do, it's about what He can do through them. Think about Moses. He was a murderer who ran away from Egypt and lived in the wilderness for 40 years. When God called him to go back and deliver the Israelites, Moses protested. He said he wasn't good at speaking, that he wasn't qualified. But God didn't look for someone more polished or confident. He chose Moses, and He gave him the help and strength he needed to do the task. Look at David. He was just a shepherd boy, overlooked by even his own father. He made serious mistakes, including adultery and orchestrating the death of a man to cover it up. Yet, God called David a man after His own heart. David wasn't perfect. He was repentant. He was humble. He trusted in God's mercy more than his own merit. Then there's Peter, bold, passionate, and impulsive. He loved Jesus deeply but denied Him 3 times out of fear. Most of us would think that kind of failure would disqualify someone from leadership. But Jesus restored Peter and used him to preach on the day of Pentecost, when thousands came to faith. Even Paul, who wrote much of the New Testament, began as Saul, a persecutor of Christians, present when Stephen was martyred. If God were only interested in using people with clean records and spotless pasts, Paul would have been the last choice. But God transformed him and gave him a mission that would impact the world for generations. These stories aren't just ancient examples. They are reminders to us today that our past does not cancel out our future. Our flaws do not disqualify us from being used by God. He knows exactly who we are, every weakness, every mistake, every fear, and still He calls us. Not because we're perfect, but because He is. We often disqualify ourselves before God even speaks. We look at our lives and say, God can't use someone like me. But God says, I already knew who you were, and I still chose you. He sees beyond what we've done. He sees what He can do through us. And often, the very thing we think makes us unusable is the thing God uses to show others His grace, His power, and His ability to restore. God gets glory not from polished performances, but from authentic lives surrendered to Him. When people see us overcome addiction, anxiety, failure, or fear, and still walk in love, still speak truth, still show up for others, they know it's not us, it's God in us. That's the power of a God who works through imperfection. So if you've been thinking you're too messed up, too far gone, too broken, too doubtful, or too weak to be used by God, let this be a reminder. You're exactly the kind of person He uses. Bring Him your fear. Bring Him your weakness. Bring Him your failures. He can handle all of it, and He can turn it into something beautiful. There is something deeply humbling about weakness. It exposes us. It reminds us that we are not in control, not invincible, not always capable. And yet, in the kingdom of God, weakness is not something to be ashamed of. It's not something to hide or avoid. In fact, weakness is the very place where God's strength shows up the most. It's the doorway through which His power enters our lives. Our weakness doesn't disqualify us. It invites God's strength. We live in a world that teaches us to avoid weakness at all costs. Be strong, be independent, hold it together, fake it if you have to. Just don't let anyone see that you're struggling. But God's way is different. He says, when you are weak, then you are strong. Why? Because when we reach the end of ourselves, when we stop pretending to be enough, God steps in and shows that he is more than enough. His strength isn't just a supplement to ours. It completely fills the gap where our strength runs out. In 2 Corinthians, the Apostle Paul talks about a thorn in the flesh, something painful and persistent that he pleaded with God to take away, but God didn't remove it. Instead, he responded with a truth that echoes through the ages. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Paul came to understand that his weakness wasn't a problem. It was a platform. It became a place where God's power could be seen clearly, not hidden behind Paul's own ability or confidence. That principle is true for us too. When we are weak, emotionally, physically, spiritually, God doesn't stand at a distance, waiting for us to get it together. He draws near. His presence becomes more tangible. His voice becomes clearer. His grace becomes more real. Often, it's in the hardest moments that we truly learn to lean on him, not because we're being spiritual, but because we have no other choice. And that's when we find out just how strong he really is. God's strength is not just about helping us endure, it's about transforming us in the process. Our weaknesses become a canvas for his glory. Think about the areas in your life where you feel the most incapable, the relationships you can't fix, the habits you can't break, the anxiety you can't shake, the pain you can't heal. Those are not the places God avoids. They are the very places he wants to work. He steps into the middle of our mess and says, this is where I will show you who I am. But for that to happen, we have to surrender. We have to stop relying on ourselves and start trusting him. That doesn't mean giving up. It means giving over. Surrender is not weakness in the way the world sees it. It's strength in the way heaven sees it. It's choosing to stop fighting in your own power and letting God fight for you. It's admitting, I can't do this, and believing that he can. This kind of surrender is not easy. It goes against our pride, our instincts, our desire for control, but it is also freeing, because when we stop carrying what was never ours to carry, we discover the peace that comes from depending on someone greater than ourselves. God's strength doesn't just carry us, it changes us. It grows our faith, deepens our trust, and reminds us that we are never alone. So don't be afraid of your weakness. Don't run from it. Don't hide it. Bring it to God. Lay it at his feet. Let him turn it into a testimony of his faithfulness. He is not waiting for you to be strong enough. He is inviting you to trust that he already is. The power that raised Christ from the dead lives in you. That power isn't diminished by your weakness. It is revealed through it. In your lowest moments, in your darkest nights, in your most broken places, remember this. God's strength is not only enough, it is perfect. And it shines brightest when your own strength is gone. So if you feel weak today, take heart. You are in the perfect position to see God move, because our weakness invites his strength. And in that holy exchange, lives are changed, hearts are healed, and God is glorified. Failure is something we all face. It's part of being human. We try, we stumble, we make mistakes, and sometimes we fall hard. There are moments when we look back and wish we had made a different decision, spoken different words, or taken a different path. And when those moments pile up, it's easy to begin believing a lie, that our failure has disqualified us, that we've missed our chance, that we're no longer useful to God or others. But that couldn't be further from the truth. Failure does not disqualify you. Just because you failed doesn't mean you're finished. In fact, failure is often the very place where God begins to do his most powerful and redemptive work. One of the greatest lies the enemy whispers into our hearts is that our failure defines us. That one mistake, that one season, that one moment of weakness now labels us forever. But God doesn't define you by your failure. He defines you by his love, his grace, and his purpose. When he looks at you, he sees who you are in him, not just where you've been or what you've done. God is not in the business of discarding broken people. He is in the business of restoring them, redeeming them, and using them in ways they never imagined. The Bible is filled with people who failed, sometimes in dramatic, public, and painful ways, but their stories didn't end in failure. Take Peter, for example. He walked closely with Jesus, declared he would never deny him, and yet, when the pressure came, Peter denied knowing Jesus 3 times. That moment could have been the end of his ministry. He could have walked away in shame. But Jesus didn't leave Peter in his failure. After the resurrection, Jesus sought him out, restored him, and gave him a new assignment: feed my sheep. Peter went on to become a foundational leader in the early church. His failure didn't disqualify him. It prepared him for a deeper level of dependence on God. Then there's Jonah, who ran from God's call and ended up in the belly of a great fish. Or David, who committed adultery and orchestrated a cover-up that led to a man's death. Or Moses, who killed an Egyptian and fled into the wilderness. All of them failed, and yet all of them were used mightily by God after their lowest points. Why? Because they didn't stay in their failure. They turned back to God. They allowed him to restore what was broken. They trusted that his grace was greater than their past. God doesn't just forgive failure. He transforms it. He takes the very thing the world says disqualifies you and uses it as a testimony of his mercy and power. The failure that once brought shame can become a story of redemption. The scars that once felt like proof of weakness can become reminders of God's healing. What the enemy meant for harm, God can use for good. But for that to happen, we have to be willing to bring our failure to him. Not hide it, not pretend it didn't happen, not let it define us, but bring it in all its messiness and lay it at his feet. God isn't surprised by your mistakes. He already knew, and he already made a way to bring you through it. He isn't waiting for you to be perfect. He's waiting for you to be honest. He's waiting for you to trust that his love is still bigger than your biggest failure. And maybe that's where you are right now. Maybe you're carrying the weight of something you wish you could undo. Maybe you've believed for too long that you've messed up too badly or wandered too far. But hear this today. God isn't finished with you. He hasn't changed his mind about you. The calling he placed on your life is still alive. The gifts he gave you are still there. His grace is still available. Failure might have delayed you, but it doesn't have to define or destroy you. So lift your head. Let go of shame. Come back to the God who restores. You are not disqualified. You are not discarded. You are still chosen, still called, and still deeply loved. And if you let him, God will take your failure and turn it into something beautiful, something that shows the world just how powerful his grace truly is. There are many moments in life when we feel the weight of our own limitations. We come face to face with situations we can't fix, challenges we can't overcome, and battles we don't have the strength to fight. In those moments, it's natural to say, I can't. It may come from a place of exhaustion, discouragement, or simply honesty. We know our limits. We know what we're capable of, and we know when we've reached the end of ourselves. But here's the beautiful truth we often forget. God's ability is greater than our inability. What limits us does not limit him. What we can't do, he can. When we say, I can't, God doesn't respond with disappointment. He responds with power. He isn't waiting for us to be strong enough. He isn't relying on our perfect plans, flawless efforts, or endless strength. He is God. He is able. And when we are honest enough to admit that throughout Scripture we see example after example of people who were completely unable to fulfill the tasks God called them to, at least not in their own strength. When God called Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses immediately pointed out his weaknesses. He didn't say, "You're right, Moses, let me find someone else." No, God reminded Moses that he would be with him. It wasn't about Moses' ability, it was about God's. The same was true for Gideon. He was hiding from the enemy when God called him a mighty warrior. Gideon couldn't see it. He said he was the weakest in his family and that his tribe was the least in Israel. But again, God wasn't looking at Gideon's resume. He was looking at his own power. God told him to go in the strength he had because God would do the rest. Even the disciples of Jesus were ordinary men. Fishermen, tax collectors, doubters. They weren't scholars or spiritual giants, but Jesus called them anyway. He taught them, walked with them, and empowered them. After his resurrection, he sent them out with a mission far beyond what they could accomplish on their own. And they changed the world, not because they were able, but because he was. This same truth applies to us. We often hold back from saying yes to God because we're too focused on what we lack. We think, I'm not smart enough, spiritual enough, strong enough, experienced enough. But none of those things determine whether God can use us. It's not about being enough. It's about trusting the one who is more than enough. God's ability goes beyond our limitations. He sees what we cannot see. He moves in ways we cannot imagine. He brings strength when we are weak, wisdom when we are confused, peace when we are afraid, and provision when we are in need. Nothing is too hard for him. No situation is too broken, no person too far gone. He specializes in doing the impossible with the unlikely. When we say, "I can't," it's not a failure. It's a declaration of dependence. It's an invitation for God to step in and show his power. And he will, in his time and in his way. Sometimes he changes the situation. Other times he changes us in the middle of it. But either way, his ability is always greater than our inability. Faith is not about pretending we have it all together. It's about trusting the one who does. It's about standing in the face of impossibility and saying, "I don't know how, but I know who." When we live that way, we stop being limited by our limits. We start walking in the confidence that comes from knowing God is with us, for us, and working through us. So don't let your "I can't" be the end of the story. Let it be the beginning of God's "I can." He is not limited by your weakness. He is not held back by your lack. You may not feel able, but he is always able, and he will do what only he can do if you're willing to trust him. His power is not waiting on your perfection. It's ready to move through your faith, because in the end, it's not about what we can do, but what God can do through us. Faith is one of the most powerful and misunderstood parts of walking with God. It's often thought of as a feeling or a certainty, something that comes when everything makes sense or when we feel strong and capable. But real faith, biblical faith, is deeper than feelings and stronger than circumstances. It's not built on what we see or how we feel. Faith is trusting God beyond what we can do. It's choosing to believe that God can, even when we feel like we can't. It's stepping out in obedience, even when the outcome is uncertain, because our confidence is not in ourselves, it's in him. There will be times when everything in us wants to hold back, when logic tells us we aren't ready, when fear whispers that we're not enough, when experience reminds us of every past failure. In those moments, faith doesn't mean we suddenly feel brave. It means we move forward despite the fear because we know who is with us. Faith is not the absence of fear. It's moving forward in spite of it, trusting that God's strength will meet us where ours end. Think of Abraham. God asked him to leave everything familiar, his home, his family, his country, and go to a land he had never seen. He didn't receive a full map, only a promise. And Abraham went, not because he had all the answers, but because he believed the one who had called him. That's what faith looks like. It's not having every detail figured out. It's trusting the one who does. Peter knew something about that kind of faith too. When Jesus walked on water toward the boat, Peter asked if he could come to him. Jesus simply said, "Come." That was it. No explanation of how, no guarantee that Peter wouldn't sink, just an invitation. And Peter stepped out of the boat. He walked on water, not because he could, but because he believed that Jesus could hold him up. And even when he started to sink, Jesus reached out and caught him. That moment didn't disqualify Peter. It revealed the nature of faith. It's not about staying above the waves by our own strength. It's about trusting the one who never lets us go. We often think we have to be strong to have faith. But faith is not about how strong we are. It's about how strong God is. Even a small amount of faith, faith as small as a mustard seed, can move mountains, not because the faith is powerful in itself, but because of the one that faith is rooted in. God honors even the smallest steps of trust. When we take a step, he meets us there. When we move forward in obedience, he provides the strength, the wisdom, and the grace we need for each moment. Faith becomes especially important when we reach the end of our ability, when we've tried everything and still see no change, when the door doesn't open, when the answer doesn't come, when the healing we pray for is delayed. That's where faith is tested, but also that's where it grows. Trusting God beyond what we can do means acknowledging that he sees the whole picture, even when we only see the next step. It means letting go of control and believing that his plan is still good, even when we don't understand it. There will be seasons when all you can say is, "God, I don't know how, but I believe you can." And that is enough. That is faith. It's not loud or dramatic. It's steady and quiet. It's choosing to show up, to keep believing, to keep praying, to keep walking, even when you don't feel strong. That's the kind of faith that pleases God. That's the kind of faith that changes lives. Faith is not about ignoring reality. It's about choosing to trust a greater reality. It doesn't mean we deny the struggle. It means we believe that God is greater than the struggle. It's not blind hope. It's confident trust in the character of a God who never fails. So when you feel like you can't, when you feel small, overwhelmed, or afraid, remember this: God can. And that's where your faith belongs, not in your ability to figure it out, but in His ability to bring you through it. Take the step. Trust Him with the outcome. Walk in faith even when you don't see the whole path, because when your confidence is in Him, not yourself, you'll find strength, peace, and courage that only He can give.